Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the M. Weena Foundation of New Jersey, the Thomas and Teresa Malarkey Foundation, the Open Society Institute, the Center for Educational Outreach and Innovation at Teachers College, Columbia University, the William T. Grant Foundation, and from the corporate community, Rhoda Finn. I'm Richard Heffner, your host on The Open Mind, and it may well be that one of those many entertainments that now appear quite so frequently in the new New York Times, a particularly cutesy At Lunch with Neal Gabler, my guest today, actually best reflects what he calls his unified field theory of American culture in a new book that portrays the United States in an age of post-reality, a republic of entertainment increasingly devoted to indulging the fantasy lives of its citizens. But let me read just a little bit more from this bit of all the news that's fit to print. Writes Ralph Blumenthal, costumed in Ralph Lauren colonialist garb, slenderized in health clubs, body sculptured by plastic surgeons, and coached on lifestyle by Martha Stewart, ordinary Americans, he says, in Life, the Movie, How Entertainment Conquered Reality, published by Knopf, are appropriating the trappings of celebrity to carve out prime roles in their own life movie. But Mr. Gabler, looking every bit the cultural critic, Armani Black, stubbly salt and pepper whiskers, doesn't seem overly worried. Anyone who writes seriously about American culture is not in danger of becoming a celebrity, he said. Still, Mr. Gabler, the author of books on Walter Winchell and Hollywood, does not protest when lunch is arranged at Jean-Georges on Central Park West. It is, after all, a locale in Woody Allen's new movie, Celebrity, featuring many starry types, of course. If, by my theory, the movie never ends, said Mr. Gabler, right now we're doing the interview scene. Contemporary American culture may be the first in history to permit its citizens to live entirely within their own manufactured reality, said Mr. Gabler. Increasingly, their lives are altering to their, Americans are altering their lives to conform to their movie fantasies. Where once movies were judged by how closely they approximated life, now life is rated by how closely it conforms to the movies. Even celebrity criminals seem consumed by how their acts would play for a movie-addicted society, said Mr. Gabler. News, too, he said, is increasingly packaged as entertainment, with wars and presidential crises getting pithy rubrics, Crisis in the Gulf, White House under siege, like movie titles. We always thought that politics and economics are the crucial forces of our time, but entertainment is the most inexorable force of the 20th century, Mr. Gabler said, lofting a morsel of chèvre and salmon mousse in a pastry shell. We export it, and the world eats it up. It's the best hunger satisfier that man has ever devised. So I think I'll begin today's program by asking Neal Gabler just how come we Americans are so good at satisfying this seeming universal hunger for entertainment, and still more entertainment, and to hell with the more serious and laborious matter of thought and logic and reason. How come?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I begin by saying that, I mean, entertainment is pleasurable by definition. And of course, there is something very powerful about the pleasure of entertainment. But what makes this a republic of entertainment, as opposed to France or Germany or England or India, for that matter, is that I think that in those countries, and certainly in the European countries, there was state religious authority that actively quarantined entertainment because it saw entertainment as a competing system of values. And there were entrenched elites in a very rigid social hierarchy that quarantined an entertainment culture because it realized that entertainment culture challenged its social and cultural power. In this country, the most popular form of religion in the 19th century was evangelicalism, which was itself a form of entertainment. I mean, when you think of the evangelical minister ranting and raving and whipping his congregants into a frenzy, I mean, that was a form of entertainment. And even though evangelical ministers fulminated against entertainment every bit as much as their European counterparts did, it didn't have quite the same force because the form of religious worship betrayed their fulminations. As far as elites were concerned, this was a country that, at least theoretically, was democratic and that disdained elites. So that we created, in my estimation, an entertainment culture that challenged the high culture of the elites. And although most people would say, and to this day they would say, that popular culture is the default culture for the mentally impaired, I make the case in my book that entertainment culture was a deliberate choice because it was the antithesis of the elitist high culture. Now, I'll add something else if you permit me to go on for a moment here. I know this is a long-winded response, but if you look at the subtext of entertainment, one of the words that is often used to modify entertainment is mindless. And if you look at that word not pejoratively, but descriptively, entertainment is, looking empirically, pretty mindless, by which I mean that it makes its appeal not to the intellect primarily, but it makes its appeal primarily to the emotions and to the viscera. And in some ways one could say that the subtext of all entertainments, regardless of what it is, regardless of the overt message of that particular entertainment, is to depose reason, to enthrone the emotions and the viscera, which is why entertainment is also called sensationalist. In both senses of the word. It's sensationalist in the sense that it's lurid, and it's sensationalist in the sense that it makes an appeal to our sensations. Now, let's look at the subtext of America. The subtext of America, particularly in the 19th century, was that this was a country devised to overthrow repression, English repression, and the repression of elites. So when you examine the subtext of entertainment, which is to depose reason, and the subtext of America, which is to depose repression, you conjoin these two things, they reinforce one another in a very powerful way to create an entertainment culture in this country. Hence, we are the Republic of Entertainment.
Mr. Gabler, as you talk about this, you talk about how we were formed and why we were formed. I think of, what are their names? Jefferson, Madison, Adams, and so on, the founders. And I wonder if their anti-establishment posture and actions would have enabled them to say, as you say, that they were essentially pro-sensationalist. They were pro-feelings and emotions rather than ideas, pro-viscera rather than intellect.
Well, certainly Jefferson, I think, would qualify. I don't know whether they would have gone whole hog and said, look at, we are, an emotional country as opposed to a country of reason, although in the Republican movement, as opposed to the Federalist movement in this country, one could make the claim that there was a good deal of emotion and sensationalism and viscera involved in the whole Republican impulse. But if they laid the political groundwork, and if that groundwork was ultimately realized in the presidency of Andrew Jackson and the era of the common man, I think that they also laid the cultural groundwork as well. And
the founders?
The founders did, though they might not have taken claim for it. I mean, we think of entertainment culture, popular culture, as being a 20th century phenomenon. And in fact, when I embarked on this project, on Life the Movie, I thought, well, most of my work will be concentrated on the 20th century and the rise of mass media. As I investigated, I found, in fact, that it was not a 20th century phenomenon. It was, in point of fact, a 19th century phenomenon. And I traced it back to the period of Jackson, where the rise of political populism, again, at least theoretically, one can make the claim that Jackson was not really a political populist. But the rise of political populism in the Jackson era what gave rise to a cultural populism. And in that period, in the late 1820s and the 1830s, that is when we have this grand diffusion of penny press and almanacs and stage melodramas and all of these things that were the precursors of the movies and television and radio, a popular entertainment culture. So in some ways, one can trace it back to Jefferson and the Founding Fathers, though it's a tortuous course, I have to admit.
Well, torturous, I think, is the correct word. To Jackson, yes, but if we talk about the backwoodsmen dancing on the tables at the inaugural party in Jackson's time, if we talk about all of the entertainment thrust that you relate yourself to in this book, what is the judgment to be made? You're very careful to say
yes, I am.
that you don't want to make a judgment. How in the world can you not?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I think that almost all cultural critics begin from a certain position. They are on the mountaintop, and they are preaching to the debased and benighted, masses below. And almost every book of cultural criticism not only takes that posture, but scolds, Americans and says essentially, look, I'm superior to this whole process. And I think when you finish books like those, and there are scads of them, you feel a certain kind of complacency. I say that it addresses entertainment mentality. There's an entertainment mentality that says, look, there's closure at the end of the movie. It's told you what to think and how to feel. And I think most cultural criticism does the same thing. There's that same kind of complacency and closure at the end of most books about contemporary American society, and you feel superior to the process. That's about them. When Lasch writes about a culture of narcissism, even though he's indicting all of America, you read the book and you say, well, that's not me, that's somebody else. I didn't want that to happen in this book. Nor did I want to be a Cassandra in this book and say, we are going to hell in a handbasket. This is the end of American civilization, as so many cultural critics say. I think one has to be very careful in delineating what are the pernicious effects of an entertainment-driven culture and what are the salutary effects of an entertainment-driven culture. Now, there are pernicious effects. I certainly don't deny that. And in fact, as I say in the introduction to the book, the book has an attitude. It may not have closure, but it has an attitude about the absurdities to which entertainment has driven us. And they are everywhere. From the Monica Lewinsky scandal to Martha Stewart, to Fox Television, which heavily concentrates on so-called reality programming, shocking moments, famous pet attacks, high-speed car chases. All of these are part and parcel of an entertainment-driven society. And they can have negative effects, and if you like, I can delineate some of those.
I'm not asking you to, but I'm fascinated by what you say there, because on page 9 of this wonderful book, Life the Movie, you do say, you write, while this book is not without an attitude, particularly toward some of the absurdities to which entertainment has driven us, readers are here forewarned that it is diagnostic rather than prescriptive, an investigation rather than a screed. At the bottom of that page, you say, talking about entertainment, it is, or the American approach, it is not any ism but entertainment that is arguably the most pervasive, powerful, and ineluctable force of our time. A force so overwhelming that it has finally metastasized into life. And I thought, aha, Gabler does have an attitude. He wouldn't
you're saying
have
I'm
used
tipping
the
my
word.
hand. Well, I use Ebola virus earlier in that chapter, metastasized, and I talk about corrosive effects as well. And I use those words advisedly because there are corrosive effects, and there is a metastasis, and there is an Ebola virus in the way that entertainment works. But let's examine, where those things are harmful and where they aren't. For example, if you look at conventional entertainment, which increasingly drives this society, I have no great quarrel with conventional entertainment. I think that pleasure is one of the things that entertainment gives us. We have more time for pleasure than any previous generation, and so I can't really look down my nose at conventional entertainments like movies and television programs and
Why do you say
at least
that,
generically I can't.
Why do you say that as a disclaimer? I can't do that. In fact, the book is saying, I won't look
I won't
down
do
my
that.
nose.
Exactly. And I don't feel that way as well. I mean, some people see this as equivocation. It's not equivocation. You know, there's a difference
Except
between
for
being...
the metastasis.
Well, except for, I'll tell you about the metastasis in a moment, because I think there is a metastasis going on, but and we have to identify exactly where it is. I mean, surgically, we've got to do the biopsy on our culture, find it, and identify it. So in terms of conventional entertainment, I have no quarrel. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum, which is something that you alluded to earlier in the New York Times piece, and that is in ordinary people's lives. It can have negative effects, but on the other hand, it can have very salutary effects as people use the movies that they write of their own lives, their own scripts, to help them cope with modern reality. And I'm sure we'll get into that in more depth. But now let's look at the center. The center is where entertainment pervades institutions that heretofore were not necessarily entertainment institutions and converts them into branches of show business. I mean journalism, I mean religion, I mean education, athletics, the courts, almost every aspect of American life, I claim, is in one way or another, to a greater or lesser degree, converted by entertainment into an entertainment force. That, I think, can be pernicious. And again, I say can be because I think we've got to be careful on how we frame that. Let's take journalism, for example. I don't think that I'm broadcasting any news on this program, though I'd like to, when I say that, you know, journalism is a branch of entertainment. And one watches the evening news and sees story after story after story that is selected and positioned and prioritized on those network news broadcasts. We won't even talk about the cable news broadcasts, but even on the network news broadcasts for entertainment value. John Benet Ramsey gets more time on any network news broadcast than the tens of thousands who were killed in Bosnia or who are being slaughtered now in Kosovo. I mean, that one little girl, because her story has all of the great melodramatic elements that appeal to viewers, that story gets far more attention, out of all proportion to its real importance in our lives, than stories that are arguably far more important. Is that dangerous for an informed citizenry? Yes, I think it can be dangerous for an informed citizenry. On the other hand, you know, number one can say that if viewers demanded information from their network news broadcast, they get it. If 30 million people watch the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer every night, then NBC, CBS, and ABC would be forced to convert their broadcasts or change their broadcasts into something that more closely resembled the NewsHour. Still, on the other hand, you know, there is a NewsHour for those of us who want serious news. Entertainment is an inexorable force, and it will marginalize anything serious. And I say that in the book. It will marginalize serious journalism, as we're talking about here, serious issues, serious ideas, serious art. It will marginalize all of those things. Will it drive them off the planet? I think not.
But you think it won't drive them off the planet. Will marginalization do us damage? What do you think?
I think it can do us damage.
Now, you've twice now used the word can.
Because
do you think it does?
Not necessarily, because these things won't be driven off the planet, we can find them. I mean, if you want serious things, you can find them.
What difference does it make whether you can find them if you are talking and you are writing, and you do write that way, about the impact of the entertainment shtick upon the rest of American life? It marginalizes, and then you go through.
Yes.
We can go through the courts, sports, education, every darn thing in our society.
Including ideas, which is where...
Starting with ideas.
Yes.
Starting with the hardest labor of all, which is thinking.
Exactly.
Rather than feeling, sensation.
Yes, exactly.
Pleasure. Then are you really unwilling to have that attitude toward...
Well, you know, I'm not unwilling. Let me concede this. Let me concede this. I think that entertainment creates a mentality for us. And that mentality is dangerous if it's across the board. That I will concede.
And you've already told us how it's across the board.
Yes, although there are pockets that any of us can seek. If any of us want those things, they're not commercial because they're not entertaining. They're not popular because they're not entertaining. Serious things are marginalized, as I said, but we can find them if we want them. And if we wanted to change the course of our society, which I don't think is going to happen, you know, all we have to do is change our mentality to desire these things, to seek them out. Now, clearly that's not a simple thing, and it's not going to happen. What I describe in the book...
Not in the middle of this movie.
No, not in the middle of this movie, it's not. Because what I describe is an evolutionary process that began, you know, long before the 19th century in America. It began possibly with the cavemen. But it's continued and it's been intensified through the mass media because we have desired this. And it changes us. It changes our lives, it changes our society, it changes every institution with which we deal.
Neal, why have we desired it? And you're going to list as the natural basis of pleasure over pain, yes, or at least over nothing, over no feelings. But what about the role that the purveyors of entertainment play in leading us further to desire entertainment, entertainment, entertainment?
Well, I certainly don't deny that there is money to be made from entertainment. And in fact, one of the things I do in the book, though critics have not picked up on this, is, you know, I kind of reverse the traditional idea that market capitalism drives everything, including desire. Now, this is an idea with deep traditions in our culture. And what I say in the book is, you know, that really kind of begs the question of talking about market capitalism. What is market capitalism doing to drive desire? Let's examine that. Because, I mean, to say simply that it drives desire is meaningless. What it does to drive desire is it feeds our insatiable appetite for entertainment. So that market capitalism, one could say, is stage 2. Stage 1 is entertainment. And entertainment drives market capitalism, not the other way around. But having said that, I think that, you know, there is no media elite, in my estimation, that is manipulating us and making us desire these things. I mean, there is a media elite that's exploiting our desires and doing it quite craftily. But ultimately, they're responding to us. And we're the ones who make the demands. You know, politics in this country may not be as democratic as we may think, and I think the American people have an instinct about that. But entertainment culture is a reasonably democratic process. The nomination process is rigged. I mean, that's clear. We don't nominate the movies that we want Hollywood to make. We don't sit in a room with those executives and say, look, I want to see this, 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 and this. We don't do that directly. But the voting itself, we don't need voting monitors to tell us, you know, that the voting, we vote to see Armageddon, or we vote to see The Water Boy, or we vote to see Deep Impact, or whatever. And we vote to buy Alanis Morissette. And we vote to watch ER on television. I mean, every time we watch something, or listen to something, or read something, we are casting a vote.
And you use the word democracy in relation to this casting a vote. But I thought that democracy was a political matter, not a cultural matter. And hasn't that been where, in the age of Jackson, as you suggest, where the shift and the change was made, that we have taken a political doctrine, democracy, all in favor say aye, all against say nay, and applied it to the mind, where I don't think, our founders at least, meant it to be applied?
Well, again, I don't want to quarrel with you on the Founding Fathers, but I do believe that the shift did take place during the Jackson period, and I do believe that the shift you describe, which is from a political matter to a cultural matter, did happen and continues to occur in this culture. And there may be, as I say, some cause and effect relationship. That feeling powerless or not feeling fully enfranchised in the political arena, we move our power, we shift our power to an arena in which we do feel fully enfranchised. And I think most Americans, though they, you know, kind of rant and rave against Hollywood and against, you know, television executives and against the whole process of entertainment making, nevertheless vote on the product and endorse the product and feel, I think, some sense of enfranchisement when they enter the movie theater or watch television or read a John Grisham novel.
But you see, I expect, forgive me for being so personal, but I expect this scholar I know, this articulate, brilliant writer, Neal Gabler, not necessarily to look and see the shift from exclusively using democracy as a political tool to making it overwhelmingly a cultural tool. I expect him to say, this is bad, I reject it, I don't want it. I can describe it, but I don't want it. And you won't do that.
No, I won't do that. I mean, because, you know, first of all, I'm not sure that it's a bad thing to have a sense of cultural democracy. In fact, you know, I think one can say it's healthy for democracy.
A sense.
And when one looks at totalitarian societies, what one finds again and again and again, whether the totalitarian societies of the right or of the left, is that they do everything in their power to tamp down any kind of true entertainment culture. And that when the repression begins to lift, one of the first things that enters the new atmosphere is entertainment. I talk about this in the book, and we've seen more evidence of it in the last few weeks, but in China, as China begins to lift some of its political controls, one of the things that's filled the breach is soap opera and melodrama and trashy novels and all manner of television programs and kind of detritus of you know, popular culture. And it has a democratizing force, which is, I think, one of the reasons why totalitarians say, no, we've got to keep this at bay. We can't really permit a true entertainment culture to flourish because it will threaten us. And so there is a cause and effect relationship here again.
Neal Gabler, we've got so much more to say, but I've just gotten a sign that for me to say now, goodbye. Stay where you are, and we'll do another program, okay?
I would appreciate it. We just cleared our throats.
Thanks for joining me on The Open Mind today, Neal Gabler, and thanks, too, to you in the audience. I hope you join us again next time. If you would like a transcript of today's program, please send $4 in check or money order to The Open Mind, P.O. Box 7977, FDR Station, New York, New York 10150. Meanwhile, as another old friend used to say, good night and good luck. Continuing production of The Open Mind has been made possible by grants from the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, the M. Weena Foundation of New Jersey, the Thomas and Teresa Malarkey Foundation, the Open Society Institute, the Center for Educational Outreach and Innovation at Teachers College, Columbia University, the William T. Grant Foundation, and from the corporate community, Rhoda Finn.